David at DCES UK, once again sporting a crap haircut and a stupidly long ARC fault detection device horror show, because it's all change here in the cave as my battered old ARC fault rig now has a substantial new addition with 16, yes, count them, 16 AFDDs from a varied mix of manufacturers, so we can all get a better look at what's on the UK market today, how these products differ, and how they perhaps sometimes don't so much. In past presentations, I've been putting various brands through my Series ARC ringer, and out of the 7 models previously at my disposal, we've witnessed 6 devices do the do in my less than lab conditions, with only Hager's sporty model, complete with its fluffy dice and go faster stripes, proving stubbornly tough to trip. Not that Hager said anything to me directly, but word heard by others was that their gadget wasn't fooled, as my Series ARC Wicker didn't comply with the requirements of BSEN 62606. Fair enough. I always said that was the case, although there are other aspects of their particular model and marketing I took issue with last autumn. With a copy of 62606 in my possession, I've completely overhauled my whole setup, with the chamber now outfitted with the correct electrode materials. Gone is the brass, now I'm using carbon graphite and copper, sized as 62606 requires. Also gone is the Lego adjustment malarkey, replaced now with an ingenious jack screw for finer adjustment and less chance of the whiff of burning plastic. So I'm hoping for success on all models today. Bear in mind these still aren't proper lab conditions, this new chamber being less BSEN 62606 and more DSES 62606. And if you get hold of that standard, you'll find all it contains is a picture of me sitting on the toilet, eating a quarter pounder with cheese and perusing the Reader's Wife section of a porn magazine while wearing only a plastic wristwatch and a jauntily angled hat. So, yeah, there's still no guarantee of us seeing any or all of these fucking things working on new and improved Rig Mark III. As I had only 7 devices previously, and 7 devices do not a house party make, in mid-March I reached out to the majority of manufacturers marketing devices not already in my possession to see if they would lend me a sample of their wares so I could organise a full-on rave in the cave to annoy the neighbours. The key word there is lend. I only asked to borrow a device, so the most it would cost any company to appear on the dance floor here is postage. We'll see as we go along who are the party supers, turning up wearing their flared trousers and gold chain, clutching a bottle of Lambrusco and ready to throw some shapes, and who are the party poopers that decided to stay at home angrily complaining in capital letters on Facebook about how the noise of other people having fun is distressing their pet dog. Well, I guess it's time to put AFD Rig Mark III through its paces. I hope this works. You wouldn't believe the hours and the expense gone into making this fucking thing, so... yes, okay. Now, I will say that I have seen, out of my array of devices, 16 devices, I have seen every one of these operate, including Hager the Horrible here. At least in on the test bench when I had it all in bits before I made it. The only difference here is that on the test bench I was dicking around with the Hager model that's Libby at Azuri Electrical sent me. So I've seen this one, which is Libby's, operate more than once, at least on the test bench. This one that's fitted in the rig here today, this is the one that I bought after putting my hand in my own pocket and grabbing my loose change. So yes, that's my one in there. Never seen that trip on a Series ARC, so we're gonna give that a go today. But let me introduce you to the equipment first of all. As I say, this is as close to IEC 62606 as I can get. Still not perfect, of course. I'm limited to what I can produce with my limited funds and mechanical expertise, which is sadly lacking. Dan from Bright Electrical was kind enough to actually cut the square holes into that for me to mount these panels, which I shall show you now. One of them is a thermometer. 20.7 Celsius and dropping. For the end of April, I'd expect it to be a lot warmer in here. I tell you, it's like bloody winter again. I think this summer's going to be as bad as last year's. Could switch that to Fahrenheit if we were somehow weird enough to want to do so, but I don't think so. We also have a, if I power it on, voltmeter and current meter. Nice. 16 devices, 16 switches. That's because, of course, I can switch each individual device to the chamber as I see fit. And no, you can't switch them all on and have some big fuck off face off, because what would happen then is you have them all on together, current will start going through the line of some and down the neutral of others, and they'll all start tripping off with RCD faults. With the exception of number 6, the Hager there, the wide boy Hager, which has no residual current detection function. But we'll come to that. We'll come to that because if I look at all of these individually, so to speak. So power is on. I'm going to switch each one of these on. You'll notice the corresponding lights of each switch illuminate as each device is flipped into the on position. Oh, it looks very impressive, doesn't it? It looks very Star Trek, that. All consumer units should look like that, don't it? Like, oh, yeah. Oh, eh? Come on, Lewden, make me a consumer unit that looks like that. We've got a bit of a accidental split. I'll say accidental because I didn't intend it, but we seem to have some green indicators on this end, some red indicators on that end, and a bit of a mixture in the middle. And you'll notice, of course, that some of these look very similar. We'll come to that. All very exciting stuff that we'll come to. The only other thing that I've got on here, if I plug this black lead in, which is rather unsexily dangling down there, is the Robin 1610. Hopefully you'll see that on camera. What I'm going to do is, when I switch the arc chamber on, when I switch any of these, the outputs of any of these active via the switches here, what will happen is 3 things. First of all, there'll be a really annoying warning bell that will briefly sound. That'll soon get on your tits, I guarantee you. The second thing is an orange light will illuminate in here to say it's live, mate, keep away, or keep your fingers away anyway. And the third thing that will happen is that we ought to get a voltage display appear on the Robin. I'll just make sure that that's properly closed. So pick a number, any number between 1 and 16. What's that you say? 8? 8? Is that what you say? 8 is the Wylex. That's the warning bell. There's your orange light, and there's our voltage indication with 2 red lights which indicate that we have line and neutral okay and line and earth okay. So in this case red lights are good. If I just give this a bit of a tweaking, what we should see here is we should see that connection crap out. There's a bit of a voltage difference there between those 2 devices. Mind you, this isn't calibrated, and that was like 20 quid from Amazon, so you know. But if I just sort of crap open that connection, you can see that I can give it a bit of a twiddle on and off without much degree of movement, just to cause it to lose its connection. So that should allow me to place some series arcing in action, and for that I shall be using a fan heater this time. Previously I used a resistive radiator. I've gone for a fan heater this time just so that you can physically see and hear something happening, as opposed to the radiator where you can't really tell what it's doing. There's also a motor in there, so you'll get a bit of a reactive component to things. Not that should make any difference as far as these devices are concerned. And the last thing to say is that I suspect that we're going to get some failures on camera today, which is not a failure of the devices, it's a failure of... I don't know actually what it's a failure of, but because we're certainly going to see some arcing. But what I found on the test bench was that there are different devices have different tolerances, and Lewden explained this to me when I went on a visit there. They were saying that on the firmware alone you have a tolerance window in 62606 where you have it too trippy at one end and not trippy enough at the other, and different manufacturers may have chosen different gradients of firmware, if you like, to say, okay, well, we want ours to work to this point or to this spec. And it does seem that some are trickier to fool than others, and we found that Hager has been the worst one so far in previous efforts when I used the brass contacts in my previous arrangement, and that's certainly still the case today. Hager and Chint as well have been the toughest to get to play ball from my experience. There's one other thing to mention, and that's whereas I didn't have to do any kind of maintenance on the old arc chamber, it either kind of worked or it didn't. On this one, and it says this in 62606, it does require some filing down because you've got the carbon graphite in there. That will sort of powder away and break down and sort of clog up the copper. And what I found doing my testing is that things like the Hager and the Chint, they kind of work best when the copper was clean and virginal, if you like. or had just been sanded down. If it was a little further up, then they were less likely to play ball, especially the Hager. And again, I've had a lot more success out of the Chint than the Hager. This Hager, as I say, I've never seen working. If we get it working today, we'll fire up the app and actually have a look at what the app reports on the series ARC. So anyway, let's talk and perhaps more action. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the Robin to do some RCD testing on this, on each one in turn, and at the same time we'll apply an ARC to it, see if we can't fool it into tripping. I'm going to try and run this at room temperature, which is around 21 degrees, because I've got a fan heater at the load. The room's going to warm up, so it's going to get sort of warmer and warmer in here. Again, I find that the hotter it sort of gets, the less operational it seems to get. So I need to get it to cool down every time. I've built in a cooling fan. There's an Axiom cooling fan on here, which will suck air through a vent on the side there and blow it out to try and drag the temperature down. The temperature probe is connected to the metalwork up there. Switch that metalwork off because it's still live. So this is what the probe's reporting on. It's not reporting on the temperature of the copper or the graphite, which are going to be much, much higher than it reports. But basically, if this starts getting anywhere near 100 Celsius, I need to pull the plug and let the damn thing cool down. Well, an awful lot of waffle, but it's time. It's time to start with. Let's start with the Hager, because this is perhaps in the best condition for the Hager to operate, if we're going to see it operate, because I have given it a good sanding. So we'll start with the awkward ones first. We'll do the Hager and the Chints first, and see how they react before we move on to more familiar turf. Let's have a closer reminder of what this Hager device is like. Hager's model ARR Game Changer is the absolute max headroom of AFDDs at a whopping 125mm in height, all measurements given in this presentation being approximate, of course, and I can also award this product our first 2 fun facts. It's taller than anything else I've seen on the market, and packing the kind of technological punch installers like me never asked for, and perhaps remain rightly wary of, it being the only device with Bluetooth connectivity and a companion app. Hager haven't been too happy with my less than positive press on what they probably thought was going to be the AFDD to rule them all, with one of their technical slapheads apparently telling rotund fanny Fat Sam from Electrician's podcast I was a drunken idiot. Drunken? You cheeky fucking... Oh no, wait, yeah, you're right. If we're going to descend into name-calling, I suspect my A-game will beat anyone's at Hager, so we'll tactically move on. Before we get into dicking around with Hager hardware one last time, they released their own AFDD video on 18th of March, and I think it's fair to say that was a damage limitation exercise following my doorstepping of their standard Ali Pali a couple of weeks earlier. So they threw this one out just before the next Elect show in Bolton, scheduled for 3 days later on March the 21st. Hager didn't want a repeat of any pestering the sales staff might have faced in February, and despite their production quality not being Spielberg standards, what they had to say was interesting. BSEN 62606 shows 2 methods of testing for a series ARC fault. One is the ARC generator, which has been my go-to and which my new rig remains designed upon. According to Hager, the ARC generator is what their older AFD technology is based on. The other method uses a carefully prepared cable specimen, which Hager showed their boffins having larks with in the lab. They say their newer single module unit is tested with the cable specimen method, as they believe that to be more real world and repeatable.
The testing you can see on the screen is using a cable specimen test. Now we use this test for the new single modular AFDD, so the algorithms are built around this kind of testing, whereas the double modular sized AFDD, which was our first AFDD, was built using an ARC generator algorithm. Both fully compliant to the standard, as Nicholas explained earlier, but there will be some differences how they react.
So that's apparently why I was easily able to trip their older model, but not their newer one, with my apparatus, a situation which may remain in effect today. The only other device I've had a hard time tripping, although nowhere near as problematic as Hager, is Chint, so maybe they too have based their algorithms on the cable specimen test. But this situation kind of reminds me of the 5 times RCD test debacle, where every other manufacturer designed stuff that worked, and Hager designed something that seemingly didn't on the face of it, yet they could still argue it complied with the product standard. They do like to go their own way. If Hager weren't so stuck up their own arse, they could have given this basic explanation last autumn when I first failed to show their gear grinding, or they could have said it to me or anyone else asking at a Lex. Instead, it took them 6 months to get out the Zippy and Bungle show here, and even then, they didn't bother addressing any of the questions or comments their video attracted. They go on to laugh off my primary concern about firmware updates, and faithful followers will know I've defined terms and conditions to protect myself from liability when it comes to updatable protective devices of any kind. And that's because if I'm faced with such out in the wild, I may find myself in a position where I have to make a choice. Do I apply a firmware update if one is available, or do I not? Both paths have consequences. Not applying an update might mean a device fails to operate when it should, which could get Hager off the hook and me in hot water following an electrical fire. Applying an update might make the thing trip more when it didn't before, in which case I'll be in trouble with my customer. Applying an update might go wrong and brick the thing, which potentially leaves me liable for the expense of replacing it. In their presentation, Hager say updates will be rare and that none of us need worry. Indeed, their current model seems to be only to apply updates to devices that are tripping erroneously, presumably with that update now blinding a particular AFD to the trip signature that's causing any aggro. What troubles me about that is, how do Hager know a captured trip signature is truly erroneous and not a valid event the detector is correctly detecting? Also, what happens if any desensitized devices are later deployed elsewhere? If Hager collate enough data to know that Hotpoint's new washing machine trips the fucking thing every time you wash your socks and pants, surely that should be rolled out to all and sundry, and not just the individual devices as and when they're reported after it's caused everyone trouble. It doesn't seem to be an operating model that makes sense, as it has the potential for Hager to eventually be splintering off all sorts of tailored firmware revisions to individual devices over time. Anyway, I've said all I have to say on this now. Hager and I will have to agree to disagree, and we'll let World Plus Dog decide whether their approach ultimately sinks or swims. Personally, I won't be buying them, installing them, or supporting them, at least not unless it's on my own terms. So, without further ado, let's get on with squeezing Hager's nipples here today and see what leaks out. First, though, I'd like to welcome Libby at Azuri Electrical to the party, turning up unfashionably early with his bottle of grappa. Libby gets the party praise for donating 2 Hager AFDDs to the cause, so it's heroes like him who help make horror like this the horrendous time sink that it is. Hager, this is your time to shine. God, I hope this works. It'd be nice to capture this on camera, but I don't hold out a hell of a lot of hope. I've got another camera here that's pointing to this thing. Let's start that off, just so that we can get some closer look at it. Now, what I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to switch on we've still got the Robin plugged in. I'm going to switch on the Hager at position number 1. Again, that bell's going to get very annoying. 242 volts, polarity is good. Switch to RCD testing and clock. Off it goes. Beautiful, beautiful. Exactly what we wanted. And we can see on here, its little yellow weenus flag is out. Let me just zoom in on the devices a bit better there. And if I hold down the button, it gives me a red indication, which steady red, residual current fault. Marvellous. I don't know why they bothered, as I said before, with the mechanical flag, because if you've got a RGB LED in there, then you can kind of get it to show any kind of colour and pattern to suit, really. But, you know, okay, if they want to build some mechanics into there as well, fair enough. Can't knock them for that. One thing that's interesting about the Hager is if you press the button to do a functional test and then push in the status button, it gives you a flashing red and green. Flashing red and green with flag present. Blinking red and green plus yellow flag present, overload or short circuit. I always thought the idea of pushing the test button, even on AFDDs, is to stick a resistor into the circuit with to test the RCD function, the residual current function. So I'm surprised that it doesn't just show a steady red and say, oh yes, that's a residual current trip as per the test button. But Hager have done something different there for whatever reason. Let's plug in our fan heater, and if I switch on number 1, we'll see an orange light come on here. We'll hear the bell sound to say it's on. The fan heater will start coming on. We'll start seeing about 10 amps of current on here, and I'll start crapping out the connection. I'm not going to give it long to operate. These things should either be working pretty quick or they're not going to work at all from my experience for this particular test. There's no point sort of prattling around with it for any length of time. All that's going to happen is going to heat up. In fact, I'm going to turn the fan on. Switch on number 1. Oh, haven't got a great connection to begin with. Fan heater's on. I'm going to give it a bit of adjustment. Oh, please, Hager, come on. And again, from my experience, if it don't go quick, there seems to be little point in persevering. So no, I'm gonna abort that there. I might try it again a bit later, but I don't want to really foul up my electrodes at the very start of the whole thing. I mean, yeah, the temperature's going up both as a consequence of the fan heaters been on, but also obviously the probes in here, or the metalwork in here, is going to be getting warm. Yeah, just as a consequence of that high temperature arcing. Remember, those arcs are probably in the thousands of degrees, so the very local connection there is quite bad. I'm going to open that up, get my file on it, and we'll let it cool down again. And then what we'll do is we'll move on to number 6, which is the older Hager, which we have seen working before, but let's see if that's fooled by this setup.
Hager's ARC model is dual width, which means we have a sensible height. However, that width makes Fusebox spacing awkward and beefs up any enclosure where a few need to be fitted. It comes armed with not 1, not 2, but 3 fun facts. First, it's the only device here today that lacks a residual current function, as it only offers arc fault and overcurrent protection. Interesting that it does have a test button, so that and the dual width form factor may cause some to mistake it for offering RCD functionality. It's also the only one in today's lineup lacking an LED indicator, relying instead on a yellow mechanical flag which pops up in a window above the test button on arc detection. Finally, it's also unique in not having a neutral fly lead. Popping into the party is Ben from Contact Electrical in Stratford-upon-Avon, who came clutching this Hager device in one hand and a can of Watney's Party 7 in the other. Thanks again for your support, Ben. Just stay out of Leamington Spires, that's my turf, motherfucker.
Right, we're going to try the Fat Boy Hager. Now, we have seen this work before, of course. Let's see now. We're back in the 20s on the temperature. Wish I was back in my 20s. Start that camera off. What else? There's no point in me doing a residual current test on this because, despite appearances, it has no residual current function. It's arc fault and overload only. It's the only device on here that lacks residual current function. It's in position number 6. Number 6 is on, and we're starting with the contacts open. Doesn't matter if you start with the contacts open or closed, it seems. We started with them closed on that thing, so maybe we'll try that again a bit later with them open and see if it makes any frigging difference whatsoever. Oh, how'd you like that? Didn't take any messing about, did it? In fact, I might just try that first one again, seeing as that operated so quickly. Let's zoom in on there so you can see it. I don't know how well it picks up on camera, but the yellow flag is showing. It didn't mess about, did it? Didn't waste any time, and because it was so brief, it won't have furred up the contacts at all. You can see the temperature's not really changed at all either. So what we'll do, we'll go back to number 1. We'll try with the contacts open just to see what that does. Like I say, I've played with this so much that I know it's not really going to make any frigging difference. But I want to give Hager a fair crack at this as much as I can. Multiple attempts off camera to try and get this device to operate without success. You know, Hager would say, well, that's not surprising, that's not what we designed that device for. As we said in our video, our older device was designed to work with the arc chamber, the newer device isn't. Maybe, okay, but I have seen, when in test bench form, operation of the ARR device. Not this one, this is the one that I bought. This is the one I haven't been able to get to work, the one that we've just seen working on an RCD trip before I turn the camera off. So what I've done is I've put Libby's one back in because this is the one I was pissing around with on the test bench. I don't know if there's any kind of difference between them. They're on the same firmware, it's the same hardware, they ought to work in the same way. But I've had success seeing this trip multiple times before with this material, not so much with this one. Like I said, I just want to just want to try and capture it on camera. It's the hardest one to fall out of all of these. It's not particularly any better than it was before, but if we can just get it to do it on camera, then that would be the icing on the cake. Hager on. What was the last flashing red and green? So that was a manual trip off, isn't it? So Hager on, still the arc chamber on. And let's fire up. I've sanded the contacts and everything down, so again, this is like when we started the video earlier. Seems like hours ago, doesn't it? This is a... You are fucking kidding me. Hey, look at that, it just went first fucking time. This is very exciting. So if I hold this button in now, we get flashing red and yellow, which... Oh, and even the bin's on for this. Flashing red and yellow is indeed a series arc fault. That's fucking amazeballs. And that just went straight away, didn't it? Let's get on to the Hager app. Excuse me. I'm really pleased about that. It kind of vindicates my hardware at last. If I can get it to work on Hager, then I can probably get it to work on anything. I've got to do an app update. One moment, please. It's the second time this has happened. I've done an app update and the option to talk to the AFDD, you probably can't see that, I'll stick an overlay on the screen. The option to talk to the AFDD has disappeared, so I've got to now uninstall the app and reinstall it, which is what I did last time this happened, and see if that sorts it out. Yes, we're back in. My protection option is now back. Protection. Connect to an AFDD. Oh, I've got to turn it on. How am I to put it into pairing mode? There she blows. Connect and update an AFDD firmware. Up to date. Oh, it says it's up to date. You'll notice there are a few series arc faults there. We've just experienced arc fault number 88. Let's see if we can stick something else in the event log. Basically a RCD trip. So that event 89 is something different to a series arc. There we go. So that should now show red light. Yep. Jolly good, and we've got the flag there as well. I'll see if I can recreate that one more time on the series arc fault. Tell you what, I'll send those contacts again. I'm so pleased I've recorded that, got that on camera, because I've got a feeling now that it's not going to be replicatable. Where are you? You don't want to know now, does it? The fan on. Back into Bluetooth mode while it thinks about it. We should have event number 89 now. Yep, sure enough, RCD trip, and get a screen capture of that. I was rather hoping that we would get another seri arc, because Hager kind of forgot to translate from the French when they did their firmware. But no, it's not playing ball. Doesn't matter. I've got it. I've got it. I fooled it once. It's not having it again, it seems.
Moving swiftly on to the Chint, and like Hager, Chint have gone their own way, so this thing has nothing in common with any other thing lined up in my lineup. Unique features include a factory upgrade port and a blue LED for normal operation. Chint are themselves present and corrected today's party and kindly provided this sample after I harangued them at Alex in February, so hip hip hooray to Chint for supporting these efforts.
I can already hear you all out there moaning because I'm fucking with your feng shui. Why aren't you doing them in numerical order, David? Yeah, okay. I'm going to number 9, the Chint now, because the Chint has been the next hardest one to crack outside of the Hager. And again, it's interesting with Chint that they've gone down on their own route entirely. I didn't realise Chint was such a massive manufacturer, but apparently they're huge. Maybe not so much on these shores, but they are huge. And they've done their own R&D, it seems. They've come up with their own product entirely, an upgradable, firmware upgradable product. The difference between the Chint and the Hager, though, being that it's upgradable by the factory via a port on the side, as is my understanding, as opposed to being something that I need to fucking worry about. Well, okay, let's switch on number 9 then, assholes. There's the bell, there's the voltage. All good in the hood, bud. Let's do an RCD test, and again, like the Hager, we're going to have a colour combination. If this is successful, that colour combination for residual current fault will be a flashing red LED. The Chint is unique in that it's got a blue LED for normal operation. The only other one to have blue functionality being the Hager, of course, if you put it into Bluetooth mode. But why would you want to do that? That's crazy. Okay, so the Chint, RCD test, doink, 29 milliseconds, and if I power it back on, hopefully you can see on camera there a flashing red light, indeed flashing red residual current fault, exactly what we wanted, is it not? Unfortunately, it doesn't stay flashing. And I've said this before about these devices, is that the status indicator on many of them is if you're not looking when you turn it back on, then you miss the whole point of it, what it's trying to tell you. Number 9 on. Come on, Chint. Again, it's the, after the Hager, the next hardest to fool. It's not having it. It's not having it, John. Okay. Fan on. Cool that down. I'm going to give it a filing down and see if I can't show that bad boy in action with another attempt.
Some time later.
The amount of times I've seen this thing trip off camera, and then as soon as I turn the pissing camera on, it doesn't want to know. I haven't made any changes to this thing. It just seems to work more sensitively if it's been off for a while. I don't know if that's a thing or if that's just coincidental, or there doesn't seem to be any rhyme nor reason to it, but well, let's give it a go, shall we? Power on, Chint on, chamber on. And oh, thank fuck for that. I've actually got it on camera for once. I can probably do that another 2 or 3 times and then it will just won't play ball anymore. In fact, we'll try that. We'll try it in just a moment. So let's turn the Chint on so we can see that fault code. Red and blue, which is series ARC fault. It'll do that for a few seconds and then it will just revert back to blue. Thus, see if we can recreate that, shall we? And now it's not playing ball. But like I say, it does seem to be that the one other thing to quickly try. I'm just going to turn off power to that entirely. Just give that contact a little bit of a sand now. Okay. All back on again. we go, it's gone again. We'll try it again a third time. I don't know if it's just that it has to have the contacts perfectly clean to operate. Like I say, it's the next trickiest to work after the Hager. And now it's not working again. But you know, at least we've had 2 successful trips out of it just there. But okay. Let's move on to the Wylex stuff, or the Siemens and Wylex stuff. We'll start with the Siemens. In fact, before I even tell you about the Siemens, let's switch on the Siemens and just prove that something actually works with this fucking thing. Thank fuck for that. Now I'll talk about the Siemens.
I'm not even sure if this device is still made, it being Siemens' first foray into AFD devices and it being a companion unit mechanically married to an RCBO, meaning, like the Hager ARC model, it's a tough one for retrofit. It's the oldest unit on the DIN rail, it being in my possession since 2018, and it's the only AFD that requires bolting onto another separate device for its functionality. I'm going to give Electrium the party super shout here, as they did provide this device upon request back in the day, although nowadays they'd consider this channel too toxic to interact with, and they crossed me off their Christmas card list somewhere back around 2020. So maybe they're turning up to the party, albeit with some supermarket lager they intend to leave in the kitchen, while surreptitiously helping themselves to another guest's Stella.
You've seen the Siemens device before, of course. It was the first AFDD I ever got my wanking clamps onto way back in 2018. It won't go back on now that it's stripped until I physically push a reset button. And when I put it back on now, we get a flashing yellow indicator, indicating that its trip was down to an ARC fault. Because this is a mechanical companion piece to an RCBO, it has no idea about RCBO operation, i.e. if I reset the indicator there, if this were to trip off because of an earth leakage fault or an overload fault, or if I were to simply switch it off, the AFDD companion has no idea of which one of those 3 events has caused it to lose power. Therefore, when I restore power, we simply get the red indicator again to say, I'm back in business, mate. So the only way that the Siemens can show a fault, or the only fault it indicates, is the ARC fault by the flashing light. Unlike its cleverer counterpart sitting next door here, which is the Wylex. It is just as easily as be as Crabtree, because both are Electrium brands. Electrium's owned by Siemens. The only difference between the Wylex and the Crabtree is, of course, the connection to the buzz bar. The Wylex uses the traditional cage clamp. The Crabtree has its proprietary plug-in interface, which is rather nice on the Starbreaker system. So let's take a look at that device, and then we'll try that in action and show how it differs from the Siemens.
Somehow Siemens managed to take all the tech in that prior package and magically squeeze it into what is the smallest AFD you'll find today, this being about the same form factor as a mini RCBO, making retrofit a doddle. This one I purchased myself back in 2020 when I updated my own home consumer unit, as detailed in my £1,300 AFDD video, link in description.
Like its dual width counterpart, it has a red light for normal operation. That also acts as the push to test switch. Off she plops. And again, the nice thing about this thing, when you put it back on, is that it tells you what the fault was. And like its Siemens counterpart, a continuous flashing yellow light like that indicates we're on a ARC fault. Doesn't specify whether it's a parallel or a series ARC fault, just tells us it's an ARC fault. However, unlike the Siemens next door to it, it can also report on a residual current fault. So if I plug my Robin back in and re-establish contact there and switch number 8 back on to the chamber, I told you that bell will get annoying. 240 volts-ish, very good, very good. Now, that indicator will carry on flashing until fucking Christmas, mate, which is the nice thing about the Electrium stuff, Siemens, Electrium, whichever. that fault indicator doesn't go away. They're the only brands that hold their fault indication, and I like that. I like to walk onto site after someone has complained that they're having tripping trouble and see that there is something there for me to look at. It's going, oh yes, a single flashing yellow LED, that means an ARC fault. Let's give it a, I'll reset that and we'll give it a RCD trip test. And by the way, it doesn't matter if that's flashing or not. Obviously, that's just the indication of the last fault. Just because the red light isn't there doesn't mean it's not doing its proper job of protection. I didn't notice what time came up on the screen there, but nonetheless, if we flick that back on now, we get a different fault code, which is 3 flashes, 1, 2, dry. And if I had the key on there, which for some reason I don't, I seem to be missing it, that would tell me that that is a residual current fault. Therefore, I need to start having a little poke around with my insulation resistance and whether water's got somewhere it ought not to.
Something a little different now, as I'm going to lump the next two together. First, we have CircPro's MK device, clocking in at 116mm tall with no fun facts to report. My missives to MK requesting they loan me a sample for this presentation went wholly ignored, making them the first on my list of party poopers. Seeing as MK circuit protection remains in the market by the bones of their arse after Honeywell fucked them off a few years ago, you'd think CircPro would be eager to get whatever brand recognition they could for next to nothing. Admittedly, they're not traditionally one of my go-tos. MK never could figure out where to place their toggle switches, making some installations look like a row of bad teeth. I'm also going to talk here of Fusebox offering, which also clocks in at 116mm and looks suspiciously similar to MK's model. I have had some dealings with Fusebox in the past, although that was back in their early days before the corporate machine that is Robus gobbled them off. So I doubt I'll be marketing friendly enough for them today. The CP Fusebox account stopped posting on Twitter last year, perhaps, like me, giving up on a platform owned by hair transplant space cadet gobshite Elon Musk. However, here's an interesting tidbit. If you search for CP Fusebox on alternative platform threads, you get called a fucking nonce under some kind of global no context you must be searching for child porn rules that can only come from America. Incidentally, going back to Twitter, try posting a tweet with the words apprentice knackers and you'll be done by that broken platform for hate speech. What a world we live in. Luckily, there is a party super to report, and it's Andrew Brown at AJ Brown Electrical who turns up to the festivities with the Fusebox sample and his guitar. Although, if you think we're turning off the drum and bass to hear you strumming some acoustic drivel, you're very much mistaken, Andy, so you can piss off out to the shed with it.
So, the MK and the Fusebox, separated at birth, methinks. They are very similarly tooled. Okay, the push to test buttons are a different colour, but they're the same dimensions in the same locations, as are the mechanical flags and the LED status windows. The MK has a slightly larger status window to the Fusebox, but nonetheless, you can see in each there is a green LED centrally located. So what we'll do then, we'll switch on the MK. Marvellous, polarity is good, 240-ish volts, and we'll do an RCD test on it. 38 milliseconds. Now let's switch on the Fusebox. RCD test on that. Also 38 milliseconds. Let us restore power. And we can see the same status code with the same LED that's now to the right of the status window. And in sync and stopping at the same time, which indicates there's something similar going on under the bonnet there. Now that's not necessarily a bad thing. A lot of these SMEs don't have the R&D capital to be doing what Hager and Chint have done and going their own way completely on creating these AFDDs. So they're looking for technologies out there that they can license perhaps. It doesn't necessarily mean that these are all constructed the same, and we'll get onto that later when we get onto this crowd of devices over here. But obviously MK and Fusebox have gone for something quite similar there. So there's similar programming, similar chipset. Doesn't mean they're made the same. There may be different materials inside. There may be different firmware revision. Remember, you've got this window between too trippy and not trippy enough, and MK and Fusebox might have decided to go somewhere different to each other. Let's try them on the chamber. What have we got on? Nothing's on at the moment, so let's switch on the MK. Oh, that crapped out straight away, didn't it? Which is rather marvellous. We should probably see something fairly similar with the Fusebox then, I guess. Oh, maybe not. A little bit of extra jiggery pokery required with the Fusebox, which again may indicate that they're operating on slightly different parameters in terms of their firmware, but restoring the power, I imagine, will give us the same fault code. And I know I've seen the Fusebox before, but it was a very short-lived fault code, if I remember rightly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you're out. So blink and you miss it with those devices. But that's both the MK and the Fusebox for you, and each of them we've seen working today. Thank fuck.
Our Garo offering sports 115mm of length and, like the MK and Fusebox, has a mechanical flag which is green when off and an LED which is green when on, which, as I've mentioned before, may be argued as something of a disparity. Garo themselves join us at the party after donating their device at Rexel Connect Live back in March, so thank you Garo for your support, and do help yourselves to the cheesy nibbles and a pipe of Pringles.
Marvellous. Right, yes, Garo. Okay, Garo. Garo is unique amongst the lineup, stylistically at least. What we have here is a green LED that's built into the test button. We have a mechanical flag. Let's switch on position 4. Connection's a bit rubbish by the looks of it, so let's make sure we've got a decent connection there. 244-ish volts. Polarity is good. We're going to do an RCD test upon it. 18 milliseconds. Oh, nice and fast. And when I restore power, you'll notice that there is no fault indication. It's just the green light. The green light comes back on, and that's that, mate. Which means that this is one of the devices, one of the many devices that doesn't differentiate in its LED indication of what kind of fault is there. It'll either show an arc fault via its LED, or it will just show a situation normal. So when you restore power to a device such as this, if there's no fault code shown, then you know you're looking for either an earth leakage fault or a overload fault, but you've got to figure out which. This is where a lot of these devices differentiate from the likes of the Chint, the Hager, and even the Wylex there, which can tell the difference. Okay, so we've seen that work on the RCD test. Let's put it on to the rig. And I must admit, I've been pissing around with cleaning, we are off up there, aren't we? Cleaning the contacts, sanding down the contacts in the rig and stuff. Most of these other devices don't give a fuck, it seems. The fussy devices are the Wylex, surprisingly, the Chint, the Hager. They seem to be more fussy about what kind of quality of electrode you're using there. It seems. There must be something scientific behind that. Okay, so the Garo, which one is it? It's number 4. That bell. Oh, no trouble at all. No trouble at all. And when I switch that on, we should see a fault indication. You know what? I'm going to do something here. I'm going to do something interesting. That'll make a change, won't it? I'm going to cause that to trip out again with the same fault. And then I'm going to move on to the Proteus.
I know you're thinking, David, you handsome, well-hung stallion, why have you moved on to the Proteus when we haven't quite finished with the Garo? Well, there is method somewhere in this madness, as we will see. The Proteus is quite a different package to the Garo, being about 7mm taller, with a fun fact being this is the only device here sporting a white LED. There's what appears to be an identical device at an identical price, branded as M2, which isn't surprising as M2 and Proteus are product-compatible sisters from the same stable. I didn't approach either brand personally, however loyal viewers will know that we have a party super in dance floor thrower of shapes Mark Allison of Powersonic Renewables podcast and Apprentice 121 fame, who donated the Proteus to the cause earlier this year. Cheers, Mark. Now go put on one of your LPs and show the youth what dancing is supposed to look like.
The Proteus obviously is completely different to the Garo, surely. I mean, the Garo had a green LED built into the push to test switch, whereas the Proteus has a white LED that's quite separate from its push-to-test switch. The Proteus lacks a mechanical flag, whereas the Garo has one. They're tooled entirely differently. There's nothing the same about them. Even the toggle switch isn't the same sort of size and shape. Yet, I suspect there may be something similar under the bonnet once again. So let's switch on the Proteus. And again, we'll do an RCD test. What was the Garo? About 18 milliseconds. Okay. Oh, 37. So quite different. Quite different. Okay, fair enough, fair enough. And again, like the Garo, it doesn't give us any kind of indication to say that was an earth leakage trip or an RCD trip. Let's expose it to our ARC chamber. Again, we're on number 5. Not much effort to trip it out, thankfully. Now, watch what happens when I reinstate power to both the Garo and the Proteus simultaneously. That's a very similar flash rate, isn't it? That's coming out on camera. Oh, I should put my camera on here, shouldn't I, so you can see it better. You will find those bad boys flash 19 times. Count them, 19 times, and then they'll stop. I can wait. Little bit coincidental, that, isn't it? 19 flashes at the same rate, the same flash frequency, and then they stop. Which goes to show that although they are tooled very differently, there is perhaps a common chipset or programming within them. Again, that doesn't mean that they're built the same, doesn't mean that they're the same quality. Not that I'm putting down the quality of either of them, they're both reputable brands, but there may be something common within there, and like we saw with the MK and the Fusebox, nothing wrong with that, nothing wrong with that. In fact, that almost gives you some cause for confidence that two brands have gone, you know what, that's the chipset for us. And they're not necessarily the only ones. I haven't got all makes and marks here today, but that goes to show that these companies have got confidence in whatever that chipset is to go, that's the one for us. So, yeah, that's interesting, don't you think? What do you mean, no?
We've had some right royal funsters join us at the party so far, and you may look forward to more swingers swinging by later. But now is perhaps the time to call out a somewhat surprising party pooper in the form of Skolmore Elucian, whom I doorstepped at both the Alex and Rexel Connect events. While some names simply didn't respond to my invite, Skolmore were the only brand to eventually formally reject my request to borrow an Elucian AFDD, with a carefully worded "thanks but no thanks" thudding into my email inbox a fortnight after my first enquiry.
Motherfucker.
It was a different story back in 2019 and 2020 when they wanted to pick my pickled brain for content to support their fledgling SGTV YouTube channel. You'll find numerous videos on there with my ugly mug on camera, and sure, I was paid for my time, at least for those videos set in their studio, which were all filmed over 2 visits and drip-fed out over the next couple of years, with many accompanying social media posts. My time on anything they shot over Zoom wasn't charged for, nor was I paid to review and install an Elucian consumer unit, a Avaya downlights, or an Avaya high bay on this channel. Neither did I request any recompense for the photographs of me they took, which have been used over the years on social media and in print publications, showing me pretending to install Skolmore stuff. With Elucian being one of the most recent brands to enter a crowded and already established market, and with me having a history of helping Skolmore, I rather expected them to be eagerly turning up to the party early to help lay out the nibbles and plastic sporks, and to even offer to hang around after the event to help clear up all the beer cans and sick. Okay, so maybe more recently this channel's become too lurgy-like for corporate marcoms, which is why they stayed at home washing their hair. And I get that, but here's the slap across the mush. They rejected lending me one of their Elucian AFDs on Monday 18th of March, yet just 3 days later on Thursday 21st of March, a flyer from Professional Electrician lands in my inbox, and look whose picture Skolmore are using in their advertising. So I'm obviously not that toxic to them. Now, I'm generally too drunk to give a toss that a company as big and rich as Skolmore are happy to be using my image without notice or recompense to hawk their goods, but I do find it disrespectful that my popping up asking merely to borrow a production line part with an RRP of about 90 quid to show you, a relevant and interested audience, should be shot down when they're happy to use my image in perpetuity and for free whenever it ballywell suits them. So, yeah, fucking Elucian then. Looking at a picture of one, I'd say it's a dead ringer for that Garo model we saw earlier, and likely has common processing guts to that, and possibly the Proteus and M2. I could have gone out and bought one, of course, but as I say, the circuit protection market is crowded, and Elucian? Well, who the fuck's fitting them? Seems to me they're largely irrelevant. That's not to say I won't buy Skolmore, I quite like a lot of the Avaya and Click stuff, but Elucian? Well, who gives a fuck?
You know, when Skolmore gave me this beer fridge about 4 years ago, it never occurred to me that they'd regret their logo being in the background of my rather unsavoury presentations, but maybe it is the case, so perhaps I should cover up their logo with something. Oh my god, I've got a Hager sticker over here, actually. There we go. Now everybody's happy. Let's move on to the Lewden.
Looking at Lewden, we've a unit that's 115mm tall and which sports a red LED on the top left of its front face. The more eagle-eyed and sober-minded of you may hark back to last year's video with a Verso and figure there's some striking familiarity between that and our Lewden. And indeed, if I line up all the remaining devices in my possession with Lewden and Verso bookending them, we can see some cross-brand commonality, at least in terms of appearance. Lewden's device perhaps differs the most, with a raised front profile and thoughtful features like an anti-slip ring over the buzzbar terminal and a separator between the output terminals. And big up to Lewden as the ultimate party super. Not only did they respond to my cold call requesting an AFDD sample, they invited me and Linda to their UK plant for a day to give us a tour and their time with their Tech boffin. Compare that to Skolmore's miserable response. That's why the last CU change I undertook saw a Lewden board go in and not a fucking Elucian. Oh? Yeah, exactly. If the stuff on this channel is useful to you, then remember which brands have helped make this happen today and which figured you and I were the shit on their shoes as you make your purchasing decisions. Clearly, there's a lot more in common than just physical appearance, and that's perhaps best demonstrated by powering this group of 7 down simultaneously, where you'll notice a distinct flash pattern as the plug is pulled, which surely means the same programming across brands, although not necessarily the same programming revision, component grades, or build quality. Take Axiom, for example. They're a budget firm offering another product from this same stable, and one of the ones who ignored my sample request, making them an addition to the party pooper list. Axiom are a CED brand which seems to retail primarily, if not wholly, through nonsense high street never any stock on the shelf waste of space tool station, and they're punting AFDDs at 75 beer tokens ex VAT, whereas the cheapest Lewden I can find is 3 Guinnesses more expensive at Hungry Horse happy hour prices. Lewden tell me they went for the top grade components and coatings in their AFDD because they didn't want any headaches with product failures when out in the wild. That's so when and if calls come into their tech support lines from people experiencing ARC trip faults, Lewden would know it's less likely to be a false positive caused by a decision to go cheap on the capacitors or other electronics. Now, you may think that's corporate marketing fluff, but Lewden's been around since 1946, has good wholesaler penetration, and clearly cares about who are using their wares out on the sharp end. They can't afford to lose face by scrimping on this kind of product and having it bite them on the arse when it's released into the world. Can the same be said about faceless Axiom, who retail through a DIY chain and have no meaningful online presence? Google Lewden technical support and you get a phone number. Google Axiom technical support and you get a French rapper. Faceless fucks like Axiom aren't going to give a shit if you buy their lower cost model, only to find it problematic. They'll just figure you'll return any perceived failures back to store if within the warranty, whereas proper brands like Lewden stand by their build quality and aftercare. Electricians podcast were just talking about how you should support wholesalers selling fitting electrical brands and not the screw fixes of this world punting in-store nonsense, and this is why. Looks can be deceptive, and if the remaining models were rattled through, maybe some will be the same inside, but not all will, so despite physical similarities, you make your own judgment as to what may be worthy. And again, the fact so many SMEs have plumped for whatever underlying technology is being used here perhaps speaks confidence in that technology. Firmware and build qualities may vary, but fundamentally, they've all said at some point that basically works and ought to be a safe bet for us.
What is the Lewden? Number 10, is it? Right, jolly good. I'm going to do an RCD test just on a Lewden. I'm not going to bother with an RCD test on the rest of them because A, I know they'll work, and B, when I do an RCD test on any of these devices, restoring the power gives no kind of interesting fault indication. These devices are made such that the AFD unit is kind of separate from the RCBO internally. It doesn't report on what the RCBO is doing. There's no report on any kind of earth leakage. There's no report on an overload fault or anything like that. They do report on things like over voltage, but I can't show that using my rig. I have seen that. There may be a video coming up about that we filmed at Lewden. Let's give it a fault, shall we? Let's give all of these remaining fuckers a fault. Again, number 10. We know we've got power to that. Let's crap it out. I anticipate no problems with any of these based on this kind of chipset. Sure enough, the Lewden's tripped out, and if we restore power to it, we get a distinctive fault indication pattern. I can't remember what it is, 9 or 10 flashes, something like that. Not very many. And then it goes back to being a steady red LED. So let's move on to the next one, which is Contactum.
Contactum were contacted and invited to this knees up, but there was no response. Maybe they figured they're too indie cool for this channel. A little surprising really, as I had a good chat with their rep chaps at a CEF Tech Talk last November, and Contactum were keen to push their name forward in my neck of the woods, where they don't currently have much of a presence.
Well, Contactum may not have been at the party, but their fucking AFDD is, because I bought it out of my own pocket, so it's sitting right here in position 11. If I switch it on, this is still in the same position as it was when the Lewden tripped off, so it won't need much adjustment, I'm sure. Or doesn't need any adjustment, in fact, it's just straight off in that position. I might just leave that where it is and we'll see what happens elsewhere. But again, you're going to get the same fault code, same amount of flashes, and well, there you have it. Now a word on Europa.
Europa's AFD offering is yet another that would be quite at home in this lineup. Sadly, they too poo-pooed the party. At first it looked like they were going to be a shoo-in as one of the lesser-known kids hanging around nervously in the corner by the plant pot all evening while nursing a single drink and trying not to catch anyone's eye too much. Attempts to lure Europa here today weren't for any lack of effort either. I spoke with their reps at Rexel Connect, followed by an SMS and Instagram back and forth, all of which went on for nearly a month. On Instagram, we went from a high of, we're thrilled about the opportunity to work together, down to the depths of, we are currently reviewing our influencer strategy and will need some time, which is another way of saying, oh, we didn't realise until just now you're that miserable drunk bloke, we're going to quietly backpedal the fuck away from this one, please don't contact us anymore.
So yeah, it's a shame about Europa because I'm all for the underdog, but I guess they just felt that this channel and by extension you, the audience, were just too, I don't know, gutter for them or whatever. Either that or maybe someone at Europa's fucking someone at Hager. I don't know. I'm not going to speculate on idle gossip. I'm going to move on to CPN Cudis.
The sample from CPN Cudis sees the same dimensions as the others. However, we have a fun fact for this one in that it has the longest neutral fly lead of all the models in this presentation. Maybe some of the Cudis enclosures are larger than most, I don't know, but it helps prove my point from earlier that despite similar appearances, this later bunch aren't all simply off the same cookie cutter and different manufacturers can specify their own specifications. And a special thanks to CPN Cudis for being the only company I didn't have to harass to obtain this model. I had a good chinwag with them at Alex in February and they kindly passed this example to me there and then. Kudos to Cudis. Jolly good sports that you are.
It'll come as no surprise, I'm sure, that the CPN device, oh, well, it'll work just fine, won't it? What can go wrong here? It'll work just fine. What are we on? We're on position 12. or a little bit of a twiddle required. And that's interesting, actually, because the CPN was another device that didn't work brilliantly on my prior arrangement, which makes me think, seeing as I've just had to do a twiddle there compared to how the Lewden and the Contactum went, that Cudis might be on a slightly different path on their firmware there. They might have some slightly different parameters as to quite where they trip. Perhaps. This is just speculation. What do I know? But again, same fault code. So there may be something slightly different in the way that that device works. Nonetheless, it works.
Next is Niglon, a familiar name to most, at least in the world of accessory parts. Perhaps less so in circuit protection, although the gents manning the stand at Rexel Connect tell me it's a family-owned operation with quite some pedigree. Niglon joined the A-list here today, having quickly dispatched this sample to me soon after my asking them at Rexel. Hip hip hooray for Niglon!
Niglon, no nonsense. I guarantee. 13. Well, maybe some nonsense after all. Okay, that's fine. It did the job. So yes, Niglon, another one under the belt. Marvellous. Moving on to a British General.
British General is a Luceco brand, and like an increasing number of brands, especially after this video I fear, I'm clearly not in their good books. That became apparent last year when they blocked me on Twitter, which I only found was the case while making a video called Lousy LED Lighting, where, ironically, I was praising their Eco Baton range. They had the hump, however, because I've been active on Twitter moaning about their floodlights and EV granny charger socket. The fact is, I put my money where Luceco's mouth was, and their products quickly failed out in the field, more than a few times, which left me stuck for sorting out warranty claims with my customers and right out of pocket. There's no point in manufacturers getting pissy with installers like me just because installers like me are prepared to get vocal when their goods don't live up to their hype. Anyway, although Luceco were present at Rexel Connect in March, there seemed little point in my approaching them, and I was all but resigned to forking out for a BG device, which I did want for my rig, because it is a popular and accessible brand. For the record, I did ask Luceco via email and Instagram, and was predictably ignored. To the rescue rode in a knight in the form of West-based Direct, a wholesaler in Middlesex, who kindly secured a sample for me. Again, I encourage you to support those who keep the lights on for this increasingly dilapidated channel, and West-based Direct even have a YouTube channel for you to peruse, their channel and website being linked in the description.
Yes, I really did think I was going to have to buy one of these BG devices, so do go and check out that wholesaler, because he saved me a pretty penny there. Number 14. No nonsense, once again. I mean, that's the nice thing about whatever this chipset or programming these devices are all using, they fucking work. And, you know, have you had any... It'd be interesting for you to say in the comments if anybody's had problems with any nuisance tripping on any of these brands, because we know there's been some nuisance tripping on the Hager, which is perhaps unfortunate because perhaps Hager gets reported more than other brands. But I want to know, are you experiencing nuisance tripping on any of these other devices? And how do we know what is or isn't a nuisance trip? Maybe there is a genuine fault sometimes that these things are acting on that are perceived as being nuisance trips when perhaps they're not. But the fact that all these brands have gone for this particular model and there isn't a big problem that's all over the forums, all over social media, of people suffering from nuisance trips with this kind of chipset, well, it kind of bodes well for that chipset, doesn't it? And we can see it working here today without me having to faff around with cleaning any contacts or anything. Next is Motor Control Group, or MCG.
MCG is a brand exclusive to CEF, and not one I'd approach directly. However, I did task the helpful chaps at my local cities to secure me the MK and Contactum devices we saw earlier, alongside this MCG example, all of which they did for me as keenly priced as they could. So although those are all brands I've paid for, I would like to give a deserved party shout to CEF Warwick, who officially aren't wankers, despite internet rumours and the unfortunate graffiti someone, who remains completely unknown, spray painted onto their bins.
Position 15 is our MCG. And if we give it a twidlet, no nonsense. No messing about there at all. And then there was one, and it's Verso.
We're finally on the last device in the lineup, and we've seen the Verso before, of course. Linda and I showed it successfully working on Rig Mark II back in October. The big news with Verso is the change that's gone on behind the scenes. You may recall that in March I reported in my SBS video that something had gone awry at Verso, with head honcho Will Winter departing parent company Premspec Group. Anyway, long story short, Will Winter's at the helm of new company Navitas, and Verso gear is on the market under them instead of Premspec. You can find Will divulging more on the Talk Up podcast, or making funny hand gestures and coining wank phrases on a recent electricians podcast.
We're actually vertically integrated, so they owned.
That's someone I don't understand. Vertically integrated.
So
Will himself sent this example to me last autumn, so Verso are the final guest making it to tonight's bash. Although the party's nearly finished, and really there's only the washing up to look forward to and the fishing of some drunk guy who nobody seems to know from out of the garden pond.
We've seen the Verso before, of course. It was featured in my Hager hatchet job video, which was originally called Verso versus Hager, before things all went to cock. So we know it works. We know it's not going to be any trouble at all. Let's give it a bit of a flick of the wrist, and there we go. Off she pops.
Before we move on to the coffee, cigars and hand jobs, let's take a moment to remember those who couldn't be here today. Not that they're dead, you understand, I just forgot to invite them. Powerbreaker and Live are two who unintentionally escaped my beady eye. The former was at Rexel Connect, I think on the Super Rod stand. The latter were at Lex Coventry last year. My apologies, kids, you simply slipped my mind, which is probably just a reflection of your availability in my part of the world. If I were to bet beer money on it, I'd say the Powerbreaker is yet another matching the appearance of the Lewden, Niglon, Cudis, Verso, etc., while the Live looks like it might be along the same lines as the MK and Fusebox. Eaton and Schneider were the big names I didn't bother with, mainly because I'm not aware of either behemoth flogging domestic single form factor AFDs at this time, both still selling 2 or 3 module units at stupid prices, it seems. Interestingly, both of these brands were once my go-to for a domestic CU, with Schneider Easy 9 being my board of bling prior to 17th edition Amendment 3 in 2016, and Eaton tending to be my desired DB for a duration afterwards. In recent years, both brands have, in my lowly view, taken their eye off the domestic market somewhat, and neither has seen the colour of my money for a long time. My apologies for anyone else omitted from this presentation. I tried to encompass as many marks as I could. Some may be breathing a sigh of relief at not being on my radar, others may have a feeling of missing out. But unless something significant happens on the market, this really is the last word on AFDDs for a good while. I'm sick to death of the fucking things. Let's finally recap on the heroes and zeros of this video, and again I ask you to remember who helped here when you're next ordering in the goods. Heroes in filming order are Azori Electrical in Leighton Buzzard, Contact Electrical in Stratford-upon-Avon, Chint, Electrium, AJ Brown Electrical, Garo, Mark Allison from Powersonic, Apprentice 121 and Renewables podcast, Lewden, CPN Cudis, Niglon, westbasedirect.com, who provided the BG, CEF, that's Warwick's branch, and Navitas Verso. On the zeros list, we have CertPro's MK, CED's Axiom, Contactum, Europa, and have I missed anybody out? No, I think that was it. Oh, there was Elucian, but who the fuck cares?
That was a really good insight into the world of AFDDs. What an expert.
Yeah, what an expert. Yeah, and it's interesting to see, how he showed us with the rig, how it worked.
Yeah, very intense, very, very knowledgeable, and very reassuring to see that expertise.
Yeah, definitely.
Ahoy hoy, once again from Portugal, doing another coffee shout out. The last coffee shout out from Portugal was so well received that I've flown all the way here again to do it once again by night. This is not the same trip as before, completely different trip or something. Anyway, yes, nice evening for it. Excuse me, still got the stupid cough. Quite a few coffee shout outs to go through tonight, and in fact, you know, that bridge does actually light up. It'd be quite nice. I probably should have. Love, can you plug the bridge in? The bridge, can you plug it in?
The cable's all tangled up.
I'm sorry about this. The plug's in there somewhere. It sounds like the leads are all knotted. You know how things get. But the missus is just unknotting the leads now, and hopefully she'll sort out the illumination of that thing very shortly for us. Anyway, I'm on the local brew, Super Bock, in litre bottles. This is the way the metric system should work. Marvellous stuff. Now, quite a few shout outs to go through tonight, because following my tool theft, there have been many generous contributions. We'll start with a whore that is Damien. I think we ended with Damien last time, or you sent me on the coffee shout outs last time, as I recall. Another fine fault finding video. Not sure about the biscuit choice. Enjoy a brew on me. I'm trying to remember what biscuit I had now. This must have been at the place with the dodgy light, the very posh place. I've got a feeling was it a Kit Kat or something? Can't remember, but whatever it was the right choice for the job. Another whore, Andy Hills, good old Andy Hills, have a bullseye tap towards some new tools. That's a very generous amount, Mr. Hills. I was just speaking in the last video coffee shout out about Andy's contribution of an Ethos 8400, which has gone to Bryant Electrical, down at Bryant Electrical, and now he's given a bullseye to the cause. A generous chap, as is Mr. Humbug, who also contributes a bullseye and breaks his vow of silence by saying, sorry to hear about the tools, Dave. Well, thank you, Mr. Humbug. Always nice to see you contributing to the channel. It's colder out here than it looks, by the way. Who goes on holiday somewhere that's sort of wetter and colder than at home? Anyway, never mind. I suppose it is like, quite late in the evening. Whore, Andy Carouche. Good old Andy Carouche over in the Isle of Man there. If only they had done this 12 months ago, Nick the Tools that is, and Nick Nigel's shit bag of worthlessness. Yes, I concur. If they've got his plumber's bag of tools, then nobody would have cared, would they? Come on, love, I'm going to run out of bloody time here. Get that thing plugged in. I'm sorry about it. It's obviously more tangled than I thought. A virgin, no less. Sean, sorry to hear about your tools being nicked. Same happened to me. Well, I'm sorry to hear that it happened to you, Sean, and yes, it is a shitter when it does happen. Pain in the arse for a working person to be hit in that sort of way, so I'm sorry it's happened to you. I'm quite fortunate that I've only been done the once, I suppose. People like Nick have been done multiple times. The whore that is Azori Electrical, good old Libby. He simply says scumbags. I presume he means the thieves and not the people appearing in front of the camera, such as myself. I keep bumping into Libby at the trade shows, so I'll probably see you again at Lex Coventry, perhaps, Libby, if I attend that one. Always nice to bump into you. We have a virgin in the name of Johnny, who says, put this into your tool funds, Dave, and has made a generous contribution to the old tool cause. We have a promotion to whore, Miles LibC. Miles has his own YouTube channel, I'll link that in the description. Miles joins us on our Unreal Tournament evenings as the basic cannon fodder for we better players. But it's always nice to see you popping up, Miles, on Unreal Tournament. Generally play that on a Monday evening. There is a page linked in the description where you can go and join in the fun if you're that way inclined. A virgin, Clive Quinn, who says he's retired now, but he enjoys this channel immensely. You know what, Clive? If I were retired, I'd enjoy watching some poor sap going about doing this shitty day job as well, instead of having to actually do the shitty day job. But I'm glad you get something out of it, even if it is to gloat that you no longer have to put up with the work.
Got it.
Well, there you go. She managed it in the end. Nice one, love. Adam is a virgin. Always enjoyed your videos over the years. Well, I've always enjoying my videos over the years. I don't, even though we've never spoken before. But welcome to your virginity. Ahor, M-Stock Electrical. You still get your Casio, Dave. Yes, I should be thankful that, you know, the Casio is still there. One of my many Casio in my collection. The bastards didn't get that. A Virgin, Richard. Thanks for the vids. Thank you for tuning in, Richard, and for your donation toward the new tool fund. Another Virgin. We're Virgin heavy on this one, aren't we? John T. I've been in that situation about 15 years ago. They peeled the side door open. Yes, that's one thing I was thankful for, that the van wasn't in any way damaged, because that would be the real pisser if that were off the road. Ollie, who hasn't said anything. That's very unusual for you, Ollie. You normally have a comment to make, but thank you once again for joining in on the chaos that is this channel. A promotion to for Keith Whitehead. I hope they fall over and lose their balls on something blunt. Yes, indeed, a sentiment that I can get quite on board with there, Keith. Thank you very much for contributing. A Virgin, Mendez. Were you on Barry's World in the day? You have the patois. If so, what Nick Stroke Games? I had to look up what Barry's World was. It was a game server. It's got you access to game servers. What do I know much about such things, including things like Unreal Tournament, ironically enough, which is now something that we play on a Monday evening with the likes of LibC. But no, nothing to do with Barry's World. It's a new one on me. Or if I didn't know about it at the time, I long since forgot about it. It looks like they closed down in 2001. Ahor, test gear junkie. Open your own tool shop or get rat-assed as they come. I think that's a nod to how many contributions are perhaps coming in. I'll try and do both if I survive. A Virgin, Andrew Strider. Happens to even the best of us. And the worst of us, it seems, I'm afraid, Andrew, but thank you very much for your contribution. Moving on to Super Wanks, just 4 to read out. There's plenty more to get to, but I'm just going to do 4 here because I'm aware that this is going on for quite a long time, and I'm getting quite drunk at this stage of the evening. Virgin, David Rawlinson, 904, who is a yellow Super Wanker Virgin. Thank you very much, David. Nodger, 000, who is also a yellow Virgin. Wonderful names these Super Wankers have. Samstride 6793, who is a yellow whore. A promotion to whore, in fact, so well done on that, Samstride. And finally, for this shout out, we have Colin Ritchie 1510, who is a very generous orange super wanking Virgin. Thank you, Colin. I'll tell you what, let me get the camera. I'll show you what's around here before I sign off for the night and go get drunk. Yeah, it's pretty sweet, isn't it? You've got to love Portugal. The architecture's amazing. Shame it's not a bit warmer, but there you go. It's not exactly peak summer at the moment. Right. Well, I've got some drinking to do, so off you pop.